Hey everyone, welcome back to some pro-revenge stories. I hope you had a great day. If you enjoy the video, please click the like button. The first story is called, Shouldn't Take My Money. This happened about 10 years ago. My grandma was getting old. She was in her early 90s. She had one wish, to not end in a senior home. This was easily done as my grandpa sold some assets way back when and then invested the money and let it ride for over 30 years. He never touched it and collected a pension. Way back when my grandpa died, about 10 years before this, my grandma appointed my dad, this aunt, and my uncle as the trustees of the trust. Basically, the trusted advisors for her and her care for the foreseeable future. All was well in the beginning, but then my dad, Willie, moved further away and couldn't take care of the day-to-day upkeep as the trustee and to see that my grandma was okay. My aunt Rebecca told her that she and my uncle Fred, who lived in Arizona, could take over and all would be fine. It was fine for a while. A few times, my dad went back to visit and noticed my grandma didn't always have overnight care or that her mail wasn't picked up and the driveway wasn't plowed. She also lost her cable TV and newspaper subscription. My dad figured it just lapsed, so he had the services put back on. My dad also noticed my grandma was eating bad food at times because her truck was sold and she had no transportation. She basically just chilled at the house alone and did crossword puzzles. The craziest part of this is that my aunt only lived 2 miles from my grandma, but my grandma told my dad she saw Aunt Rebecca once a week on Saturday for about 1 hour. As with the elderly and age, my grandma passed away. She did get her wish and was able to die in her own home. Upon her death, things started to get really interesting. Once the probate lawyer got her children around the table, some shady business started to come out. My Aunt Rebecca asked that everyone just forego any audit or paperwork. Just sell the house for around $400,000, and divide up the remaining bank account balance of roughly $400,000. So, just signing on the line, each sibling was to get a check for $200,000, not too bad of an inheritance. My dad thought that was somewhat a little rushed. He said at the time that he wanted to wait because my grandma's house was easily worth more based on size and location. My aunt exploded in his face, cursing at him and calling him all kinds of names because he was unwilling to sign the assets then and there. She basically wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad ended up leaving the room after the screaming and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months before another appointment and they were all back at the table. The thing is though, when you are a trustee and the person dies, the funds and access to financial accounts are all under heavy scrutiny until all beneficiaries are made aware and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad went in there with no intention to sign the deal. He got his brother to agree that they audit the entire accounts going back 5 years. When they demanded this again at the meeting with the lawyer, my aunt ended up arguing that a forensic audit would cost too much and it's a waste. Like, what difference does it make? 2 beneficiaries requested it, so it was what was going to happen. The audit report showed up about 3 months later. Here is where it gets good. My dad began looking over the audit report and saw that it was full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old lady. Or payments made for car services for a car my grandma no longer had. Many different things in there that just didn't add up. My dad asked me to give the audit a second look, so I spent a Saturday night going over it. And here is some of the stuff I found and alerted my dad about. Monthly food costs of around $1,500 for the last 4 years. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones. Grandma only had a home phone. Gasoline for a truck my grandma didn't have for like 4 years, and easily $400 per month. House repairs paid to my aunt's husband who owned a construction business with inflated prices or stuff she didn't actually had, like a home security system. Grandma paid for my aunt to go to Europe on vacation, twice. My grandma was paying my estranged aunt Becky and her son a stipend of $4,500 a month for the last 5 years. All grandkids were to be paid a lump sum of $10,000 upon their 30th birthday, as that is when the $50 check from grandma stopped for all grandkids. Guess who was paid out? My aunt's kids, but not me or my siblings. My grandma gave loans to my aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in return for equity in the company, which amounted to nothing. These loans totaled about $200,000 over 3 years, right around when the housing bust happened. They also sold her assets like jewelry and whatnot for cash. Because some big-ticket items simply vanished from her house, the next probate meeting was interesting. In the time between my grandma's death and the third probate meeting, my aunt's construction business filed for bankruptcy. So the equity grandma had simply vanished. The probate lawyer was also somewhat concerned and makes it obvious that this was fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, where my aunt could actually get real prison time. After this, the negotiations were much more favorable. My aunt got nothing, literally zero. My other aunt only received $25,000 after all the stipend payments. My father and uncle shared the rest after all grandkids received their payout. The house sold to the first offer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge, but now starts the pro part. My aunt probably felt pretty bad that she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to personally rip me off for $10,000, I took it personally. I don't care how tough you are, the IRS is the scariest thing that can happen to a person. Nobody wants to have their money forcibly removed. I did a little research and found the 3949A form. I photocopied my documents, had them notarized, and sent off the info to the IRS. I felt like it went nowhere. Then maybe 18 months later, I was notified and asked to come to the IRS building for an appointment in my city. The agent went over all the details, what they found in their research, and then they asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare something like $1 million in additional income over 5 years. And as such, she owed the IRS around $500,000 including penalties. There was no way she was going to pay that on a teacher's pension and after her husband's bankruptcy's business. Her house was sold, her vehicles sold, and they left the state. Now my aunt and uncle live in a depressing desert town in the southwest. She should have paid me my money. The next story is called, Pam Wanted to Get Her Nephew a New Job. This happened several years ago. I was working for a small medical supply company as the IT manager. Business was bad and eventually, the IT department had to downsize to just me. During this time, they brought in a new CFO that I had to report directly to. Let's call her Pam. Pam had zero knowledge of IT and how things worked. Her motto was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. PC and server lifecycles didn't exist. We don't have to pay for licensing to keep our firewall updated, it's working just fine now. I went from having an annual budget to a wish list which she would deny everything I asked for. The couple that owned the company was equally bad. One time we had a quarterly meeting and people were asking about how secure their jobs were. The owners said that nobody was getting laid off and that our jobs were all secure. This was at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. The very next morning at 9, they laid off 6 people. At noon, one of the owners showed up to show off the Escalade that he had just purchased that morning. During the first 6 months that Pam was there, she started firing everyone that worked for the old CFO and replaced them with her friends and family. 3 of her bridesmaids from her wedding a few years prior got hired to replace those that she fired. I knew I was on borrowed time. After she had been there for 9 months, I was the only one left out of what was about a dozen people that worked for the old CFO. I knew my time was running out. I had been looking for work, but the 2009 crash just happened and the job market in my area went south quickly. Sure enough, she called me into HR and blindsided me with an entirely trumped-up charge that she claimed happened the day before. I was working with the VP of sales on a project that entire day, so I had a witness. I asked to bring him in since my boss was lying and was told, this is not about him, this is about you. Remember kids, human resources is there to protect the business, not do what is right or legal in some cases. Needless to say, I knew my days were numbered. The next morning, I get introduced to an IT expert who just happens to be Pam's 21-year-old nephew. He was to shadow me and evaluate everything that I did to see if we could streamline any processes. In other words, they wanted me to train him to do my job. I quickly learned that this kid had absolutely no knowledge of IT. He's the kid people think is an IT expert because he can hook up a PlayStation to a TV. He didn't even know how to join a PC to a domain. So I knew what had to be done. The inventory, billing and shipping, and receiving were all run by scripts that I created on the server. They were all run using the domain admin account. I raised quite a fuss about giving him the domain admin account in front of Pam and him. I then loudly proclaimed that I was going to change the password to it since you can't have people who don't work for the company to have admin access to our network. I was overruled and was told to give it to him. I complied, but I also showed him multiple times how to change passwords on the domain. I even had him write it down to make sure that he could do it. I really stressed the importance of changing the admin password and deleting his local account the second he is no longer consulting with us to him. I showed him a few things but nothing in regards to what really made the company run that day. There wasn't enough time in a year to bring this kid up to speed on how to run that place due to his complete ignorance of IT. I come into work the next day and sure enough, I was let go because her nephew had found my skills lacking in many areas. I collect my last paycheck and head home. The next morning, I get a call from the CFO and owners. Apparently, her nephew wasn't quite up to speed on everything we did there, and she was graciously offering to pay me my regular salary to come in as a consultant and get her nephew up to speed on the IT infrastructure. I told her that I was now an independent contractor, and if she wanted my services, I was going to charge her $200 per hour with a 250-hour minimum. At that point, she told me that she was going to call the police and have me arrested for what I did if I didn't come in and fix everything. My response was, just so we're clear. You fired me and replaced me with a completely unqualified idiot. And now you're threatening to call the cops on me if I don't come in and fix what he did? I'll hold, please call the police and let me know what they said. She started cursing at me and hung up the phone. Turns out her nephew did actually learn something from me. He changed the admin password after I had left. The one that ran all the scripts for inventory, billing, shipping, and ordering. According to some of my coworkers, the place was dead in the water for several days until they could get a real consultant in to go through the documentation that I had created and fix the issue. The nephew was immediately fired and Pam was gone within a month. The last story is called, He Warned You. We don't own a car and live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It's not a huge deal to me, a little annoying when they compact the snow and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 a.m. I worked nights at the time. Half the time, he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, but not if he's going to honk like that every morning. And especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him, he ignored it. I spoke with him and got, what's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it. To which I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently, suggesting that he waits until the kid notices he's there or, God forbid, he has to drag himself out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway. He just ran over it. I called the dispatch for the ride service and was told they are subcontractors and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I wake up the next day to pounding on my door. The dude is angry. He screams, "How dare you call my boss, what is wrong with you?" I told him, well, it's quite simple, you were told not to use my driveway if you were going to drive on my lawn and wake me up every morning, now, get off my doorstep. He screamed, I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you. And I told him, you've been warned. Don't trespass on my driveway or property again. Quote. The dude storms off in a huff, spouting obscenities. This happened on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day, and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40 Celsius. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up. So that night, I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that read "Private Property, Driveway Not for Public Use," and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees the garbage can, backs up a bit more, and defiantly charges the garbage can as if to teach me a lesson, and proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. The dude gets out fuming, calls the cops, and comes pounding on my door screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. The cop says, so, let me make sure I understand this situation. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. Now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property? I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said, "That's not how this works," and turned to me and asking if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I just gave him a grin and said, "I think we're good." I then went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold, waiting for a tow truck and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Bye bye.